Please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Some years ago, before the death of Mother Teresa, there was a television show. And it was there that we got a picture of this grim condition that was part of her daily life. Of course, it showed the horror of the slums of Calcutta, but also her love for those destitute people. The producer interviewed her as she made her rounds in that dreadful place. Throughout the program, though, commercials interrupted the flow of the discussion. So here's the sequence of topics that were discussed and the commercials. The first topic that was discussed was lepers, and then there was a commercial for bikinis. Then there was talk of mass starvation, and then a commercial for designer jeans. Next, there was talk of the agonizing poverty, followed by a commercial to buy a fur coat. Then they talked about abandoned babies. But the commercial advertisers wanted you to buy an ice cream sundae. And then there was even talk of ministry to the dying, and following that was a commercial for diamond watches. I bring this today because our reading is full of opposites. The contrast between Lazarus and the rich man are stark. You see, one is rich, the other is poor. One is named in the parable, but the other isn't even given a name. One gets to feast, while the other lays there starving. One gets to wear fine linen, the other finds himself covered in sores. The rich man just has so much, and Lazarus has so little. The rich man's purple garments would signify affluence, an outward visible sign of his wealth and his privilege. But just as visible was the plight of Lazarus. The Greek word for sores is the same as boils, those boils that we hear about in the 6th plague that is directed against Pharaoh. So one wonders about the contrast between the fine purple clothing of the rich man and the oozing purple sores that would have covered Lazarus' body. The rich man has a pantry that overflows and feasts daily. But Lazarus, he's just grateful to receive any leftovers or table scraps that happen to fall. So with all of these opposites, it's helpful to remember that some people in biblical times, and even some people now, think that people who have wealth are favored by God. And while those who aren't favored by God, they're the poor ones. It's as though those who are good get rewarded with material wealth, and those who are judged bad by God, well, they don't deserve to have anything, and they have little. The thing is all of this gets turned upside down when they die. Of course, we see Lazarus going to heaven, the rich man going to Hades. That old understanding of wealth showing God's favor for people, it doesn't hold up in this parable. In this parable, we get to see who we are, and we get to see who God is. Here we encounter the teaching of Jesus that calls us to examine ourselves and the opposites in life. And when I think about this parable, I immediately identify with the rich man. Since Jesus is teaching how wealth can create walls of separation, or in the biblical sense, it talks about this great chasm, it's a good thing to get a handle on where we stand. One of the websites that I use to keep, to get just a glimpse of where I stand globally is called the Global Rich List. Perhaps some of you have gone there. And here in Sioux Falls, The average income annually is $29,926. And when you plug the average income into the global rich list, this is what shows up globally. You are the top 1.25% richest person according to income. So on average, people in Sioux Falls are in the top 2% of the world. First time I did this, I just stared at my computer in shock. You see, Jesus told this parable, and he's teaching that the rich need to be breaking down the barriers that wealth can create. Reverend Dr. Lundblad puts it this way. He said that Jesus doesn't tell this parable to scare the hell out of us. Good news this morning. But Jesus told this parable to change the way that we are living on this side of heaven. We are feasting sumptuously, and Lazarus is still hungry. But of course, there isn't just one man named Lazarus. There are millions of men, women, and children who long for even a crumb of what you would find on our tables. Many of them are far beyond our gates, beyond our front doors, and we will never know their names. But every 3.6 seconds, another person dies of starvation. Most of them are children. And I won't see them. Many of us won't see them because there is a great chasm between us and the millions of people who are starving. And now I know this is overwhelming. I am overwhelmed when I hear these numbers. I hear them and I feel guilty, and maybe you do too. But the thing is, guilt isn't going to feed anyone. And Jesus didn't tell us exactly how to close the great chasm between the rich and the poor, but he surely thought that there shouldn't be one. So we're left asking, what could change the rich man? Or more importantly, what will change us? Asking what God desires for me and my relationships to others, that's the point of this parable. Because the great chasm doesn't have to exist. In the middle of our backward priorities and the chasms that we create, into that mess comes Jesus. And Jesus invites us into relationship with one another because it's in community where we see the needs of others and we see the resources that exist. And we encounter Jesus and we begin to see other people in a different light. We are changed to be able to see the need of our neighbor and to respond with the love that was first given to us. You see, Jesus invites us to rewrite the parable by the way that we live our lives. And the thing is, that rewriting is happening right here in our midst. I saw it on Monday at Hy-Vee, of all places. You see, Monday evening, I needed to run in and grab just a few things before going home. And with only a few things, you get to go through the express line. That line where, at least the 49th Hy-Vee, there's this counter where you check out, but then there's a cashier right next to you, so there's two cashiers right there. That's where I found myself. And so as I was getting my groceries out of my cart, I was hearing the checkout person next to me asking if the person there would like to give a donation to feed hungry people. She said, "No, not today." Cashier says, "That's fine. We're not all in a position to help. Have a nice day, ma'am." And then it was the time when my stuff had already been rung up, and so the cashier in front of me says, "Would you like to donate to feed hungry people today in our area?" And the donation suggested, maybe some of you saw it, it was either $5 or $10, and they could scan it right in so that it just added to your grocery order. I looked at the organizations and thought, hey, I know a few of those. Sure, I'll give $5. I mean, I just spent $5 on this little cup of grapes with the cheese on top. I got a thank you from the cashier, put my groceries back in my cart to head out, when I hear the person beside me again getting that same question. Would you like to donate to hungry people today? The next thing I knew, I heard the cashier thanking him for going over and above the suggested donation. Thank you for your $20, sir. This is really generous. The customer responded, I've been there before. I've needed the help, and it's good to be able to help someone else out today. As I walked out of the store, I couldn't help but think about this parable of Lazarus and the rich man. The opportunity to bridge the chasm between Lazarus-type folks in our community and the rich folks, at least folks who weren't hurting too bad this week, was given. And to add some complexity to it, the man next to me, he had been on both sides. Needy at one point, needing food, and able to give at another time. Robert McClellan writes, this parable is an incredibly gracious story, for it is a manifestation of God yet again reaching out to God's people. Whether rich or poor, God comes to each of us and all of us with what we need. Comfort and strength to endure, or a prophetic example by which to be corrected. In either case, are we left alone to fend for ourselves? God meets us. God meets us at the gate, offering to bridge the gap that threatens to separate us from one another and from God. You see, God is always there loving us. And in that love, there is the call for each of us to see others as our brothers and sisters wherever we find ourselves, and to bridge that chasm with the way we live. Amen.